Welcome, everyone. I know we'll get some more people coming in, and we'll look out for them. Thanks for coming. Welcome to this City of Ojai panel on the Proposal Cabin Village program. Now, I know there's some possible misinformation about what are we doing here? What's the point of this today? The idea here is something that I've done in my regular work, and that is put a panel together that brings together many different kinds of voices or many points about a particular project or something like that, and have an information exchange. And that's the intention of what I'm trying to do here today, or what we're all trying to do here today, is have a chance to have the people who are delivering services every day talk about that and what it's going to mean. Sir, I'll talk about questions in 1 second. Doctor, give me 1 sec. Hold on to your card for 1 sec. So yeah, let me answer something about the cards. So I was at the Planning Commission meeting in November, and we were hearing about the location and the building, and I had many questions that the commission had. What is the program going to look like? What services are going to be there? The partnership with the county, et cetera, et cetera. So the intention of this here today is going to be very focused. Those of you who went to the Planning Commission recently, you saw the second rendition of hi there, what the building looks like at that location if it is deemed to stay there. This is going to be particular about the program that's being offered irrespective of location. So I'm going to let that sink in for a second. Irrespective of location. So that would mean, what is the county providing services for? Help of Ojai. What is the staff providing? What's the responsibility of the City of Ojai? So very pointed about that. So I hope that's clear. And what I want to do with the cards, a little bit different. What I'm hoping you could do is, if you take the cards where normally you do your public comment, feel free to write your name if you wish. But as the conversation's going on and you have a question about maybe something you want to get more detail on, write your question on the back. And then at some point, I'll kind of halfway through, I'll say, oh, if you have some questions that we haven't gotten to yet, give them to Weston. Weston will take the cards and give us a couple of questions to ask, which we will do in the last portion of our event today. But for the people who are online also, normally when we would take public comments at a meeting like this, we're going to try to reserve this to this panel and get as much out of them as we can get. So we're going to take every question that you've written that we don't have time to answer, everything that's online, and we'll type it all up and give it to this entire panel to answer and post it on the city's website. So we'll start here, answer the rest online, and the idea is let's take advantage of this kind of rare opportunity that we have the group in one room. So I hope that's clear. So you might not ask your question yet, because hopefully it'll get answered. I hope so. Maybe not. So that's the intention here today. Now, I have noticed in the last year and a half, this issue touches on people's core beliefs about what they think the role of government is, what to do with people who are in need. Now, there's obviously a spectrum. I'm not going to say there's a right or a wrong way here, but the intention that I'm wanting to do today is not a sell job, not saying there's one thing to do. I want to hear, how do the people who do this for a living, who know way more than me, what do they say is the logical response? What do they do day in and day out? What are the risks? What are the benefits? So that's our intention here today. So I hope that's clear for everybody. And I will say, at the March 25th council meeting, so the second event in March, we will focus on the location. So I hope you can come to that. So the second meeting in March, we will come up again and talk about the location. Okay? All right. That's the plan. So our schedule I talked about today, we'll be asking questions of the panel for about 3/4 of it. The last portion will be the questions that I just mentioned. So I'm going to introduce our panel first, starting from the far end. Ben Harvey, our city manager. Thank you all, the panel. We'll thank them at the end. Kimberly Albers, Homeless Solutions Director for the County of Ventura. Jeff Gaddis, Vice President, Programs and Partnerships of Dignity Moves. Trina Newman, our Ojai Police Chief, and Jane Walter, Co-Executive Director of Help of Ojai. So we've tried, yes, thanks for, they're here. This is their own time. Yep. So I'm going to ask questions of the group. They're going to talk to each other. They will add on what each other's saying. I may ask a follow-up question if something's not as clear. So just as a very brief start, I want to go to Jane Walter first and ask sort of, how did we get here? What's the brief summary of the circumstances that brought us to where we are today.
I don't know how brief I can be, Andy, but I'll try.
Okay.
So I think it's important when we talk about this grant that we understand sort of the landscape during that time, which I go back to the fall of 2023, which was when we saw sort of this encampment behind City Hall grow. Prior to that, we had folks who were living in Libby Park and kind of transitioned over here. For many, and this is anecdotal, it felt safer. It felt safer for a lot of the older women who make up our homeless population, and they were camping over here. During that time, we had a new city manager come on board, and there was a meeting between Help of Ojai, the city, the county, and we talked about solutions. And one of the challenges we've had as an agency for a long time, specifically in accessing resources, but also in supporting our clients, is once someone becomes homeless in the city of Ojai, it is nearly impossible to rehouse them because of the lack of availability of housing and specifically the lack of affordable housing. So a big part of our job is preventing homelessness, and when we can't, then we see folks become homeless and want to stay here because this is their community, where their doctors are. Some people might have family here, or where they're deeply connected, even with agencies like ours. So during that time when we were talking about solutions, it's hard to get funding when you don't have a very clear pathway to permanent housing, which was the challenge our organization had, right? If we couldn't assure that people would be able to be housed within a certain amount of time of a grant, et cetera, we wouldn't be eligible or wouldn't qualify. And so that was a challenge that we had experienced. So during this conversation about solutions, the conversation sort of went like, well, Ojai really wouldn't qualify for interim or transitional, grants because we don't have permanent housing. So that led us to the grant application where we applied for permanent housing. So we were literally solving the homeless problem in the encampment by building housing for people to go directly into. And that is the really brief, I think, explanation of that. And I'll also add that this was during the time of the Supreme Court ruling where you could not criminalize homelessness. So a little bit of a different time than it is now, but also made it difficult in terms of like violating people for trespassing, et cetera, because you could not criminalize homelessness. That has changed more recently, throughout this process, but setting that scene at that time in that fall of 2023 when the conversation started. And then of course we applied in early 2024.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. That's great.
Okay.
Wonderful. Let me move on. So Kimberly, I want to ask you, can you describe what is an ERF grant?
All right. The state of California has provided over $850 million to cities and counties to resolve encampments by transitioning individuals living in encampments to permanent housing. The point of the encampment resolution funding is to resolve both the encampment and the person who's living in the encampment's homelessness. Encampment resolution funding supports things like outreach, interim sheltering, and permanent housing solutions. The state requires encampment resolution funding recipients to act with urgency, to provide shelter and housing to prioritized encampments. You have to be specific about which ones you're addressing, through highly expedited spending and development timelines. There have been 3 rounds of encampment resolution funding so far. Oxnard, Thousand Oaks, and Ojai were awarded over the last couple of years. And as of today, if you haven't heard, Ventura, Camarillo, and Fillmore also will be receiving encampment resolution funding announced by Governor Newsom today. So totaling over $41 million in encampment resolution funding coming to Ventura County cities. Ojai's award is the largest award as it includes the development and operation of the permanent housing itself during the grant period, as there was no permanent housing projects located in Ojai, as Jane mentioned. Other communities leveraged existing or under development permanent housing projects in their encampment resolution funding applications.
Can I ask, so sometimes what people will ask is they'll say, oh, we got this grant. Well, can we take the money and do something else with it? So talk about the limitations of what the grant can and can't do.
The governor actually said it today again, right? That these are highly specific plans, right? You have to state the encampment and how you're going to resolve it. with an itemized budget of how you're going to use the funds. So yes, one of the reasons the governor feels so good about this program, right, is because cities and counties were putting forth thoughtful projects and plans prior to application.
The details, like on the ones that were just awarded, how many people are being served? Do you happen to know that off the top of your head?
Oh, that's a good question.
Okay. I mean, is it similar to Ojai?
You know, actually, I think like the Oxnard project, I know it was serving like between 70 and 95, so more for $4 million. Again, they were leveraging some existing housing.
Okay.
Thousand Oaks, I think, was serving 50 with their 5.8 million.
Okay. No, thanks.
Yeah.
So this could be for Kimberly or anybody who wants to jump in, but can you describe the Housing First model? Like, what are the goals of the model? What's the efficacy of the model? How long has it been in place, et cetera? Yeah.
I'm not going to be the one that talks all night, but these first two, these first two questions are kind of on the sort of best practices and sort of the county side. So I'll start with Housing First, and then anyone else can chime in. So Housing First is an evidence-based practice to serving people experiencing homelessness that recognizes an unhoused person must first be able to access a decent, safe place to live before stabilizing, improving health, reducing what could be harmful behaviors, or increasing income. Under the Housing First approach, anyone unhoused is connected to a permanent home as quickly as possible, and programs remove those barriers with the participant as they're accessing the housing. And there's no barriers like requirements for sobriety or an absence of criminal history. Housing First success relies on comprehensive services available to the residents once they're housed. So it's not housing only, which I often hear about when people talk about Housing First. The state of, and this is very important because I think sometimes this really gets missed, the state of California now requires a Housing First approach be applied to nearly all housing and services to address homelessness through their funding agreements, and as of 2016 through Senate Bill 1380, which added Housing First language to state law. Some local housing project examples are Stevenson Place and Woolley House, both operated by Turning Point Foundation, and Central Terrace that opened recently, and several others operated by Many Mansions. Central Terrace moved in 35 formerly chronically homeless residents, so similar size to the project you're talking about, in July of 2024, and have had a 97% retention rate as of today. There's a growing body of evidence, that's why we call this evidence-based, showing that Housing First is really our most effective way of supporting people who are unhoused that have disabling conditions and longer periods of homelessness. And I brought some handouts about Housing First for all of you that really want to know more.
Can I add
please.
one more
Yep,
thing?
absolutely.
And Kimberly, I took this off the COC's website. So some of the link, I thought this was a really cool way of explaining Housing First, which is that you think about housing, housing is a tool. It is not an award. So we are not like holding access to housing over people's head to ensure that they're doing X, Y, and Z, but we're actually using housing as the way to help them to get to X, Y, Z. And also just to reiterate that it is evidence-based and it has been studied and we know it's successful.
Well, it's a good segue because here's a question that I do hear a lot and have heard a lot over the last year and a half. What about this proposed Ojai project is new and what is tested? So I think all of us feel, we have mixed feelings. Like we say, yes, we want to do things that are interesting and innovative. We don't want to do something that's going to bankrupt the city or something that is not efficacious. So I'll say it again. So what's new about this and what is kind of tried and tested? Anybody?
So permanent supportive housing in action is not new. That exists, and Help of Ojai works with clients who are in permanent supportive housing or to get into permanent supportive housing. That's the playbook, if you will, in terms of working on housing plans and supporting unhoused or housing insecure people into, getting housing. The challenge, as I mentioned before, there isn't permanent supportive housing in Ojai. So for clients who do qualify, they're often relocating, and we've seen both. Like, we see folks choose to go, but we see folks who say, like, no, I don't want to go to wherever. And that's the reality for us in the work that we're doing. But so in terms of what's new, having the actual units here is new. But what's not new is like, it's not new to house homeless people in Ojai. In this way, it's different, right? We've never had an encampment like this, but I mean, every year, like one of our goals, you know, as an organization and successes, if you could, you know, frame it that way, is housing people who are homeless or who are housing insecure. It's not tons. We struggle. It's really difficult to find housing here in Ojai, but that's what we do. And that's what case managers spend hours and hours of every week doing. And it's folks who are going from living in their cars, some who are living on the street, and they are housed. It doesn't look the same as what Cabin Village in terms of it being, you know, 30 units and people moving into a little community together. But that is not new.
And is it not new in other parts of our county? In other words, things have been in place for a while that are like this. That it would be great to hear about that.
Yeah, so I alluded to that a little bit in the other question, right? Several of the projects, but we have about 300 units of permanent supportive housing across the county right now, and some of those have been operating for a decade. So definitely not new. And then right now, right, we know that the people who are at Ojai Tent Town are going to be your original residents, and then we'll be serving, you know, others from the Ojai area as needed if there's some turnover. But the coordinated entry system, I think we mentioned, some people have questions about that. So that's a way we match people, again, who have a disabling condition and longer episodes of homelessness, but are here in the area to the project once the encampment resolution funding is over. But obviously the project right now, I don't want there to be any confusion, is for the current residents of the Ojai Tent Town.
Right. So everybody who is here right now, the vision is they would move into this project wherever it ends up being, but presumably, let's say, in that location. But that is going to lead into, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but the vision going forward at some point would be these people will not live there anymore for whatever reason, right? So now there's vacancy. And then the question is, how does it work in some of the other systems what's the criteria for somebody to come in? Who benefits from it? Who is it not for? I mean, those are great. Those are questions that everybody wants to know.
Can I back up?
Yeah, back up.
So Kimberly talked about CES, and I'll try really hard to not inundate you guys with the acronyms
Coordinated entry system
of all this work that we do. But I think it's important to know what that looks like.
Yeah.
So that is the database that we use in the county. It's part of Homeless Management Information System. And that is an amazing tool that's used in a lot of different capacities. And then one way in which we use it is through the coordinated entry system. And some of you have heard me talk about this before, so bear with me. But what that looks like is a case manager. So in this case, you know, help of Ojai staff, but again, this exists throughout the county. They meet with an individual and they, you know, build rapport. They build a connection as their case manager. They get to know them. They ask them a lot of questions, and this is not all just like in one sitting, right? As you can imagine, that relationship with a case manager is crucial. So a lot of this takes a little bit of time, as you can imagine, right? And they work together. They're assessed through a tool in HMIS, and then they're ranked or prioritized based on their vulnerability. And that has been discussed before. And with, you know, when Ames was here through Tent Town, we talked about that. But so that piece is so critical and so important. And then those rankings, if you will, are what move people into PSH, right? Like if I've identified you're the most vulnerable of my clients and you're looking and you're competing, that's horrible, not competing, but we're ranking at you against someone else within the county and identifying what's the right fit for you, and then you're offered the placement, right? Whereas here it's a little different because we're working with a community that we're moving right in, hopefully. And then beyond that, if there is a vacancy, which maybe there won't be, or maybe there will, right? Maybe, you know, some folks might live there forever, or people might move out because they need, you know, different care as they age. But if there is a vacancy, that same tool of CES is used to move the next person in. And so that's that list that's controlled through both Help of Ojai, but also with the county through our continuum of care. And I think this is what you asked. I'll go back to it.
No, that's good.
In order for us, like in order for someone to be a Help of Ojai client, they have to have become homeless in Ojai. So that's a stipulation that we've had for ages. And it's partially, you know, 20 years ago was based on the fact that, like, for us, it was resources, right? Like, we have 2 case managers. We cannot case manage, you know, people who are living in other parts of our county, but really focusing on the unmet need of the Ojai Valley, right?
Can I just ask for clarification?
Yeah.
When you say they become homeless in
Mhm.
Ojai, does that mean you know they had a
Yes.
residence here
Mhm.
and now do not? Okay.
Yeah, and
Right.
and we will verify it as needed,
Okay.
and that's looked different over the last 8 years I've been with the
Mhm.
org. I mean, we worked with people who lost their homes in Thomas Fire, and that was a whole level of verification, right?
Mhm.
And so whether it's like looking for leases or checking with landlords or checking, we will go down that hole if we need to. But
Mhm.
I will also say this town is so small that we know for a lot of our community members. And I will also say, like, whether it's good or bad, we support people often for a while before they actually lose housing. There are people who know for some time. We know that they're housing insecure. We know that they're highly vulnerable. So we know. And so, yeah, going back to then, if there's openings in the Cabin Village or any, this project, if they're Help of Ojai clients, they will have become homeless in Ojai.
So let me, if it's
Yeah,
okay, I
no,
want to keep
please.
clarifying.
Yes, please.
So then you're working with somebody. Are you making a determination to say over time that the Cabin Village has a level of autonomy sort of built into it? And you might say this person's needs are greater than what they can do there? Or in other words, that's a very common concern that people
No.
do have. Well, it's
And
who benefits from it and who
Sure.
is it not for?
Well, I think that goes back to the
Okay.
whole piece about like housing first, right?
Okay.
It's not up to us to determine whether someone is eligible or viable for housing.
Okay.
Whether you agree with that or not.
I hear you.
That's the whole rationale behind housing first, is that people who have whatever challenges that they're dealing with day to day when they are living on the street will look very differently once they are housed.
Okay.
And so it's challenging, and I would say it's not necessarily realistic to sit and say they can't hack it. They're not going to make it, right? Because we don't know. And that's not our role. But I will also say I was a case manager for many years before I was in this role that I'm currently in. It is why case management is so critical, because I knew people. Whitney's in the audience. I'm looking right at her. Like, we know people that they know it's not the right thing for them, right? But that's their decision to make, and that's their decision to make with our support. And so I think it is never our place to judge, right? But it is our place to say, I think that this intervention might be better for you, or this might work, and allowing them to make that choice. It's not perfect in terms of what we would always say, as it turns out for some people, but it is, the element of people being housed is the critical piece in all of it.
I would imagine you have the experience of somebody that you had misgivings about succeed and the opposite.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Probably
absolutely.
between us like 60 years worth, right?
Uh-huh.
Of like, absolutely, that person is ready.
Okay.
And then, 2 days later, we know they're not ready,
I get
right?
that.
They were not ready. And other places, gone through all the rehab, sober for 2 years, have the kids back. And yeah,
I get that.
just.
I mean, it's true in many fields. So then what are the housing, what's just in the roughest sense, but with as much detail as you can give, what would the housing agreement be for somebody then to go into the Cabin Village? What are some of the things they would have to agree to do? I heard you say, well, something about drugs and alcohol as some factor, but yeah, please, Ben.
So it'd be a couple different agreements. First of all, it's going to be different than what we have in OTT now, which is it's not a landlord-tenant arrangement. People living in OTT are participants, but we don't have any type of lease with them. They're there voluntarily, and we're a host. When we move to the Cabin Village project, what we're envisioning is a lease agreement that requires a third of their income be paid towards living there, but also components of what we have currently in our Good Neighbor agreement, which are behavior based. We're expecting that if you live here, these are the standards that we want you to adhere to, and they're not substance free. It's just all about your behavior and how you act in the community. And if you can't adhere to that, then that's going to be a reason that we ask you to exit. And I think we're
we
taking
want to
questions
hold off
later.
on questions.
Yeah.
So if you want to write a question down, you can give it to Weston, and then we'll take it. But no, continue, please.
I think that's all I needed
So
to say.
what I heard from Ames here, and I go, this isn't the Cabin Village, but that there was a hierarchy. In other words, it's not like, oh, you do something wrong and that's it, you're out. But like in any situation, a school or anything like that, there'd be a tiered situation.
Well, so this is a little more involved.
Okay.
The whole model has evolved, and when we started, we had a warning system, and you were allowed 3 strikes, and when the 3 strikes happened, then there would be a meeting of the managers, which was usually me, whoever at that time it was Ames, and I see Taylor Anderson, our assistant city attorney here, and we would review the situation with the individual and try to figure out, is there a way that we can work with this person so that they can change their ways so that they can stay. And we would do that because our feeling was it's better to have somebody here where we're able to help them and provide them, connect them to services as needed, than to have them just out there in the community where they don't have any help and they don't have any shelter, and they might be infringing on somebody's private property, et cetera, et cetera. So that's now changed. We still have the same good neighbor agreements, but we don't have this 3 strikes you're out system. We really evaluate the violations of the agreement on a case-by-case basis and try to work with that person. The folks who have been in the encampment now for this duration have evolved, and really what we say to everybody is that they're trying out, if you will, just for lack of a better term, for the Cabin Village project. So almost everybody in the encampment, really nearly everybody, is really trying every day to adhere to those agreements, to participate, to be part of the community, and to do the best they can. And it's evident. You see a lot less disturbance here and scuffle than you did, even a couple months ago.
Would the case managers be involved if there was some kind of behavioral issue, or is it?
Jane, you want to take that one?
Like in a moment of crisis, or what do you like?
Well, I guess I'm trying to. I know I'm
I think
segueing slightly.
let me jump in on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we want to keep the case managers focused on their mission. And
Okay.
They're trying to connect people to housing and to services, and they need to be that advocate for the individual, which is different than those who are overseeing. And you're talking about OTT and the Cabin Village, or which one are you speaking to?
I guess I'm really trying to talk about the Cabin Village eventually.
So
yeah.
So
Yeah.
in the Cabin Village model, and we did talk about this at a prior council meeting. There will be somebody who's doing a property management type role. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's different than a case management type role.
Yeah.
So I think case managers are not, we will not be there to enforce rules, right? That's not really the relationship you want between a case manager and their client, right?
Get it.
However, it's not out of the ordinary in our world now, even where we mediate between landlord and client, whether it's like the landlord coming to us and saying, we're really concerned about so-and-so's health. Like we've noticed their decline, et cetera, right? Then we are involved, we are reaching out, we are supporting, right? But it would not be appropriate for a case manager to be the person doing anything punitive, right? Or but we would of course work with all agencies in support of what is the best interest of the person.
That makes sense. No, I see that. So before we talk about sort of what does it look like, this Cabin Village, what does it look like for the services and all that, Ben, if I could stick with you, just what are the legal and practical responsibilities that the city has for the residents there? I heard you say it's a landlord, tenant agreement. That's
right. So you're speaking, Mayor, to the Cabin Village project,
yes,
right?
Cabin Village.
Okay. So yes, it's a landlord-tenant arrangement, and we've spoken. And I've seen some of our participants here in the audience, and we've in our meetings with OTT participants, we've talked about that. This is, as if you're moving into an apartment. There are rules. Yes, of course, you're a tenant. You have rights as well. But in the end, if you can't adhere to the requirements, it's an eviction process, and there's a procedure that's involved that affords the tenant rights and the landlord rights, and you walk through the process, and just like any other landlord-tenant arrangement.
So if somebody, this is a literal question, Cabin Village, somebody's there, they leave, they do something like damage property somewhere or whatever. The city's not responsible for they're not legally responsible for the person, as a landlord wouldn't be responsible for their
That's
tenant.
right.
Okay. No, thanks. I appreciate that. No, that's just a
It's
common
it's
question.
a little bit
Yep.
different though, and
Yep.
I'm just gonna jump in here a little bit
Yeah.
because we are we're trying to help these folks, and we
Yeah.
want them to be successful. And not everybody has a great day every single day, and oftentimes there are reasons why something happened. So that's why we always treat every situation on a case by case basis and make an evaluation. And we don't take things lightly. And we talk to law enforcement. We talk to those who have experienced this type of thing before. Hey, have you ever dealt with this? What did you do? It's just there's no simple playbook that we're able to consult and figure out what the correct answer is. It's
I hear you.
difficult.
And the 30% income you mentioned, now that's true even of something like Whispering Oaks has the same model. So we would use that same model. Okay, so that's not new.
I know.
Okay, no, that's good. That's what I'm trying to get at. That's
well,
great.
and just really quick to add, I mean, I'm a renter, right? And when we start talking about the stuff, I think of my own agreement, right? It says I can't be loud every day. You know,
Right.
there's, so yeah, if you do rent, just thinking of what's in your own agreement can really help visualize what this might look like.
You guys in the front. Thanks, fellas. Okay, so I want to go on to describe now, if as much as we can, the day-to-day operations. In other words, as much as we can paint the picture, what does it literally look like if you were to happen on a particular day, the operation's up and running, what staff is there for how long, who's coming, who's going? I know we saw at the planning commission, you saw the blueprints and you see, oh great, there's these offices, right, for case managers. Looks like there's somebody there taking care of things, some kind of manager. So who's there for how long and what services are literally being offered there? Anybody who wants to jump in.
So I think ideally case managers are there every day. They Monday through Friday during their shift. And I think, and I don't want to get real out of whack talking about this, it obviously will look different right now when folks are living in the tents versus when they're housed in terms of our time and amount of staff who are there. I think it would be totally reasonable in the world of permanent supportive housing, in the world of moving people out of an encampment, for there to go from the 1 to 15 ratio, which is what it will be now, to 1 to 30 with time. But I think ideally we are present, or a case manager, hopefully it's Help of Ojai, is present they're on site and they're working, again, housing first. Folks, if they do not want to work with us every single day, we are not requiring it, right? But with the numbers and with the relationships, we're hopeful that we stay busy working with folks throughout the day. But I think in terms of residents, that will also change because, I mean, there are people already in the encampment who work and they're not there all day, every day. There are people who leave the encampment and go to the library and go to classes and go to lunch at Help of Ojai. They are not at their tent all day, every day. So it will look different in terms of what that relationship is. But of course, it'd be like scheduling time to be with people. But I think between, our staff, someone will be present to work with folks.
So just for clarification, there's 2 case managers that are part of the grant. How many hours a day do you envision them literally being there?
I mean, between the 2 people, 8 hours.
Okay.
Obviously, and not obviously, but with case management, you need to sit at your computer and type notes and make referrals and make phone calls. So they're not going to spend 8 hours every day interfacing. There is an element of that job where they won't be, face to face. But I think between 2 full-time people, I would say like at least 6, hopefully 8.
Were you going to say something?
Well, so just trying to round out who else is
Yeah.
there. So there's somebody, and it might be a city employee, it might be a contract employee who's in this, for lack of a better term, a property management role, who's overseeing the lease agreements, the facility maintenance, the needs of the housing development. So that's another person that's going to be there, and it's probably a minimum of 4 hours a day. Maybe it's 8 hours a day. That's going to be something that we assess when it's up and running. I would say more at the start, obviously, just to make sure everything is covered, right? Lean towards more at the beginning. In a similar vein, so goes security. When we start, we'll have a similar arrangement to what we have here at OTT, which is somebody is here, starting in the afternoon, going all the way through the night, and 24/7 on the weekends and on city holidays, just to have that presence there. But I don't foresee that being something that's going to continue for a long time, because I don't think it's going to be needed. And that's been the consensus of the experts we've talked to, and looking at other developments like this, is it wanes On top of that, you're also going to see the sheriff's department. The sheriff's right there, and what the chief and I have talked about is, at shift change, having the deputies just do as part of their normal deal, a walkthrough of the development. It doesn't mean that they're cracking skulls. They're just that's part of their deal. They're walking through, trying to see what's going on. Just that presence, just being there all the time.
So I'm hearing, at least initially, the whole initial kind of introduction period, someone's there 24 hours a day. That's what I'm hearing. And then tapering off as needed. We'll see. We'll play it by ear.
The other
Okay.
thing you said, which I think we should point out, you talked about what you said something like, what would I see if I went by there? Well, first of all, you're not going to be able to just pop on in. Okay, so if you go to other developments like this, there's it's a gate, there's a security code. People that live there are the residents, and then the professionals who are there to help. And if you have a reason to be there, if you are providing some type of service or donation, or you're interfacing with somebody and it's authorized, great. But otherwise, you're not there.
Okay.
We're not, so similar to OTT now, we have a no visitor policy, and that's going to get firmer and firmer as we put the fence around the back of the perimeter, and we'll really be adhering to that. But that's, this is a housing area. This is not for people
Nope.
to,
Hang out. If I can,
Visit.
let me look at the other projects in the ones that have evolved or that are working. Does that mesh with how things evolve, generally speaking? I guess I'm maybe looking at you, Jeff, or Kimberly. Just when you see the project, you might see a lot of staff, and then you'll see the staff taper off over time.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. And even when we've had security presence, because that's been important to the community, we're able to taper the security presence.
Closer on your microphone. Yeah.
We're able to even taper the security presence down over time, depending on the site and the population that's there, because that's really for the comfort of the community, but also for the people living in the site, because they're new to living in the site and new to living with each other within this new, community boundaries. And so you do start to taper it off. You do get a sense of what are the needs. That's an important part of this, is the scaling of the site, the scaling of services, the scaling of staffing to the site. Because it's an extraordinary thing, because I've ran these types of sites in the most extreme cases, even up to lockdown facilities. I've worked in jails, encampments, done a lot of diversionary work of reintegrating people back into community from long-term hospitalizations. It is an amazing thing to see how fast people can stabilize and heal. I wish that you could all see what I've seen, because it would give you a lot of comfort. Just having a place of your own, and this just some care and someone who's there for you when you've been forgotten for so long, or you felt forgotten for so long, and the level of trauma that it took to get to that place where you've lost everything, and just one person coming in and caring about you and guiding you through a process, it's an extraordinary thing to watch. It's been the gift of my lifetime to be a part of that and to help design those programs that do that. And we had that experience in Santa Barbara, where we took some tough cases and we did amazing work, and no one would have even known it was going on in the neighborhood. It was extraordinary how quiet these sites are too, because there's resources there, there's presence there. That presence is powerful, but you're also really working with the people living in there on how to live together and how to support each other. And I want to emphasize this, because this is my background in many years. I teach this at the university. I believe in this with all my heart, is we are communal in nature. That is who we are. And we've lost that thread. We are so isolated from each other. And we're seeing that in the sun. These are symptoms that are going on of what's going with the housing, and then we've got housing issues, people falling out of that, right? Driving this, but bringing people back into community with an agreement of how we're going to live together without enforcing to the point where you feel like it's punitive, but it's in support of each other and of yourself. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're fostering. That's what this is all about. I am seeing it in that encampment right now over the past 6 to 8 months. And what's happened there has been extraordinary, right? So we've been doing this for many years, some of us, and have had a lot of experience doing it. So I just want to say that coming inside, having someone that cares about you and listens to you, you see so many of those behaviors just drop right down. That is what the Housing First model is trying to really emphasize. It's hard to know that when you haven't experienced it. But I'm also just want to say one last thing about this, because I go around the state to many communities. It is not what we're experiencing with Ojai, wanting to know about the site, wanting to have these questions addressed. It is not unique to Ojai. I stand in front of a lot of city councils and a lot of community meetings, and I face a lot of resistance.
No, that makes sense. Can you speak, Kimberly, about other cities? Are they having the same kind of questions and resistance, or embracing, or what?
I was just going to say, how lucky was I, because this was my first shelter manager right here next to me. And as you can hear, his just huge heart for this work. And so really made the project amazing. So you're so lucky to have him here. He's obviously in a different role for this project, but yeah, just amazing amounts of, so thank you, Jeff, for being part of this. I think you were all asking very similar questions, right? Having very similar concerns. I think it's actually been brought up, right? That potentially there wasn't resistance in Santa Barbara. And I must, I just go, wow. Large churches filled with people, very, very upset about the projects we were proposing. The project that Jeff managed from the start, actually shared a wall with a 5th floor penthouse. I'm not kidding, right? So like literally the wall of the shelter was the wall to the 5th floor with the balcony overlooking the bathroom. So needless to say, that resident was not happy at the beginning, when we were planning this project. But I think the group you've assembled, is exemplary. And, I really hope that we have some projects where we go back and we have a town meeting like 6 months or a year after it opens and no one comes. And that's the best, but if there is something that comes up, I can tell you this team will, I know from working with them already, right? They're gonna take on every issue. So, if there's, if an issue arises at the site, if there's someone, loitering in the neighborhood, whatever it is, right? That's what they're here for. That's why you're paying security and service providers, et cetera, to make sure that that everyone has the support they need to be successful.
And I wanted to emphasize on that accountability is central to all of this, and it goes both ways, always, right? But we would go out and listen to the community and really hear those concerns and address them and make sure that we were there to turn situations around. And remember, before we were there was nobody really doing that to the degree we were doing it 24/7. It makes a huge impact in your community to have this level of presence, engaging in real time and turning issues around and working with law enforcement, working with the mental health teams, working with public health, probate, everybody that we work with. It's a multidisciplinary approach. It's something that you don't see. This is a real education for this community to know that these systems have existed for a long time, and we've been working together for a long time. Since COVID and the numbers really blowing up, communities are really facing this and starting to address this as homelessness numbers rise, as housing insecurity rises, climate displacement, all of these issues that are coming up that are pushing people onto the streets. We're all getting educated together. But I think that the most important part of this is the education of you understanding that there's a real system that exists with people who are doing extraordinary work and working together very well.
Let me go into some detail about, what does it look like? So I heard kind of what you see here too. People are going to work. I know some people that I know where they work to and all that kind of stuff. So people are leaving and coming and going. There's a few questions that people had. One is, Trina, maybe I can go to you. So sheriff visits, what do you envision in this cabin village? How would that work? You're saying like a shift change, like somebody would come regularly. Okay.
Right. To be very honest with you, it probably wouldn't be much different than what we have currently already for Ojai Tent Town. We have regular walkthroughs that walk through the tent town just to, walk through and check in with people there. So I envision the same being at whatever location this cabin village ends up being. As part of our regular assignment, we would have our patrol staff walk through there just to be face to face with that community as well as the rest of our community. So it would not be any different than what we already currently do. Now, in terms of having to respond there for calls for service. Again, it wouldn't be any different, in my opinion, sitting where I've sat and have, watched what we've done over the years in Ojai Tent Town. We had the same problems amongst the city, but because we have Ojai Tent Town, it seems to be that it occurs more regularly here, when in reality it was just kind of spread out through the entire city. So I think that's a misconception that people sometimes think that because it wasn't occurring here and they didn't see it because it wasn't so close to maybe where they were, but it was still occurring within the city. So again, it would be part of our routine to check in and do walkthroughs at this location.
Well, if I can, just while you're on the mic, because I want to come back to what does it look like day to day, but what information do you have from your colleagues in some of these cities where there are projects? How are they finding safety in their environments?
Sure. So I have reached out. In fact, we have Thousand Oaks has a project that they're hopefully going to be starting here in the spring, and they're anticipating that it's going to be very successful. They don't anticipate any problems. I mean, there's always going to be things that come up, but we don't have a crystal ball, right? We can't assume what's going to happen. Santa Barbara, that model, very successful. Law enforcement has been very appreciative of that development because it really has taken problems that were occurring in other parts of their city and now has stabilized. And like many people thought that there was going to be a lot of calls and a lot of things generated because they were all going to be congregating and living in that development. But fortunately, it was just the opposite. They have very few calls there. So, again, it's different for every city. Each housing development is different because some are permanent, some are transitional. Some cities have more unhoused than other cities. So everything is different. But again, we've seen evidence. I've seen it firsthand where if you do give someone the opportunity to stabilize, it totally changes the dynamics of things.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask, so medical services and meals, I want to get to those two things. So if somebody is having any kind of medical situation, I'm hearing it would be just like anybody else renting any other place. They call 911, the ambulance comes just like normal. Nothing different there. So there's no special medical services being delivered there. Well, I want to hear.
I'll just add that
Yeah.
one of the funding sources, I think that's going to come up later, is that today we have expanded Medi-Cal services that are actually funded under Medi-Cal, so a very sustainable funding source. And so there is something called Housing, Tenancy, and Sustaining Services and Enhanced Care Management that would likely actually work through a healthcare provider to provide those services on site. So it might look a little different, right? If one of those case managers that are funded under Medi-Cal were at the site, but generally, obviously, in any kind of emergency, it would be an ambulance. And then I'll just say, if you are a neighbor, I know some of the neighbors have spoken in the meetings I've been here at, is don't assume something bad when you see the ambulance, right? Because we are talking about a medically vulnerable population. And so it would be normal, right, to have more ambulance traffic to this site, not because of something bad happening, but right, just you have a very oftentimes a medically vulnerable population that may have large fluctuations in blood sugar or different things like that. So that can be common.
Just to clarify, so under this Medi-Cal system that you just talked about, I was trying to follow you. Some people may have that kind of service provided on site delivered.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah.
And also to Kimberly's point, so like 38% of the population living in the encampment right now are 65 or older.
Right.
So I think it is absolutely possible that folks will have things like an IHSS worker or a worker who will come and help them with their like daily living tasks. There might be people who need services like that. So I think we can't rule it out that there might be folks who are coming to help. But also to your question of like, what will it look like? I think people are going to be inside their apartment. And I think they're going to be happy to be somewhere with air conditioning and with a shower and where they can cook a meal. And I think that that's what you won't see because people are going to be inside their apartments.
Well, thanks. That's a perfect segue. Meals. So meals right now I'm talking about the tent town. There's with that very small communal area, the kitchen with the microwave and all that kind of stuff. So now this goes slightly to the blueprint, but this could be the blueprint located anywhere. There's a communal kitchen. There's electricity in the room. So how do you guys envision the meals working there? Is it people are bringing it, they're going out to get the food, they're cooking there, what?
Well, it's going to kind of be all the above.
All the above.
Right, and that's sort of what we see to a degree here in Ojai Tent Town. The difference being that these are going to have little kitchenettes where people can prepare. They can eat. If it's a bigger deal, they can go into the communal kitchen area and prepare it there and eat it back in their apartment, or they can eat it in the communal area. We have a very active community of volunteers and OTT participants who put this together. I saw Rick here somewhere. Who orchestrate this daily delivery of meals. And this is a voluntary thing that's happening now, and I would envision that this goodwill will carry over to the Cabin Village, so you'll still see that too.
Just for clarification, so the kitchenette, is that sort of like a hot plate, a fridge,
Right,
a
right.
sink?
Kind of like a dorm type.
Okay, like a
type
dorm.
setup.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so basically much more than what they have there right now. So the
Definitely. So
the
yeah.
predominance of people having to bring food, I'm presuming, will lessen.
Right, and we'll have
Okay.
and we as you alluded to, Mayor, we have a break room. There's a fridge and there's a microwave and so forth. But this is a true kitchen where you can cook something. The communal kitchen, that is, right?
Yeah, right. Okay.
And having a refrigerator will be a significant change in everyone's lives. Right,
I
because
appreciate
right
my
now,
refrigerator.
right? Because right now, if you were to go to the store, you go to the food pantry, whatever source, you can't store that food very long, if at all, and that kind of changes the way you're addressing your nutritional needs every day. Versus being able to store food will significantly change people's lives.
That's what I'm hearing you say in different ways. Many of you is there's stability in different fronts that then change the whole dynamic about how the person is relating to the community. And I think it was Taylor maybe who said at the Planning Commission, or somebody said this, I guess maybe Trina, this goes to you, but it's the safety of the community at some level involves the stability of the person, right? So we all are safer in some regard, whatever it turns out to be, but stability is a key.
Yes, absolutely. Stability is a key. And, again, going back to what Jane said, there are some people that are going to be more accepting of services. And we've already seen that in the Ojai Tent Town. And, unfortunately, we've had to remove and exit some of those individuals because those are the individuals that just weren't going to go along with the program. So at the end of the day, this housing project truly is for those individuals that are dedicated and want the program to work. They're investing their time, they're helping out, they're assisting with however they can and volunteering for the project. So those are the people that want to be there and are going to be accepting of the services. So again, safety, stability.
No, I get that. No, I'm seeing that 100%. So let me move on just a little bit, if I could. So the case managers working with the clients, I'm kind of on the specific services. So we talked some about that. So the case managers are there. They have their clients that they're working with. And then how is the County of Ventura involved in providing services, I guess, Kimberly? In other words, I think that's a question that people are asking. There's the continuum of care that you all share. You share that system. I understand that. So how are you working with Help of Ojai as this begins? Or if at all, maybe you're not.
I think this might actually be a Ben question.
Okay, Ben,
but
sure.
I'm happy to chime in
No,
after
Ben,
he does.
Okay, sure. So,
Yep.
as you know, Mayor, from recent council meetings, we're going to be bringing. I'm going to be kind of scattershot in this answer. We're bringing an agreement forward for the council to consider, wherein we have case management from Ventura County Behavioral Health that is complementary to what Help of Ojai is doing, because there is a certain portion of the population, and this is going to be voluntary, obviously, but that could benefit from receiving some mental health or mental health adjacent services. And we're going to be bringing this contract for your consideration for the benefit not only of OTT and hopefully the Cabin Village project, but also Greater Ojai, because there will be people that are living not in OTT, not in the Cabin Village project, and we see these folks on a daily basis that are out there that truly are suffering from mental illness, that need somebody who's a professional, not no offense, but not a law enforcement officer, not a Help of Ojai case manager. This is somebody who's trained to interface with somebody who's suffering from severe mental illness, and so that's one part of it. The other part, and this, you see Kimberly here right now. You've seen Kimberly at our council meetings. I mean, she's a true believer. She's going to help us navigate it. It's not a simple answer, right? Like, hey, we'd like to avail ourselves of this spigot of money. How do we get a hold of this? Well, the first thing is the state has given the city 2 years worth of funding, okay? That has to be expended first. And we've received that money up front. We have it.
Just pause and say that
Sure.
one more time, because it seems to me this is a critical point.
We received a check for $12.7 million, which we deposited and we're earning interest on currently.
No, the part about we need to spend the money before then other people
We need
give
to
money.
expend the $12.7 million over the 2-year period
Yeah, okay.
first. That's one of the requirements. And Kimberly is the ERF expert much more than me, but that's what I've been explained multiple times. I'm not going to be sitting around waiting to figure out how to fund the development after that period. And that's why you saw in our cost model, we're recommending some operating subsidies be set aside. But we'll also be working with the county to figure out, hey, a portion of our population is going to be eligible for certain services. How do we get into the system so that we can do that? Things are changing at the federal level, which will mean changes at the state level. So it's, there aren't like 100% answers in this area, but we have the benefit of experts who have done these projects successfully that know how that we can avail ourselves of that.
Were you going to talk about the funding model though, or something else? Yeah.
Well, I was going to say we're kind of
Yeah.
blending questions. Is that
No,
okay?
good. Great, wonderful.
So county staff are working closely with City of Ojai staff. I think Ben and I might be on our 6th or 7th meeting already to identify funding sources to support the Cabin Village project after, right, the encampment resolution funding. With the expenditure deadlines, we want to make sure that those funds are exhausted first. There is the opportunity, depending on the cost of the construction, right, of having those capitalized operating subsidies that also could help. But
Well,
I
don't
think
talk too fast because you're saying a lot
Okay.
of really important
sorry.
things. No, but
yeah.
you said,
so
you
what's
said we have the money to build, we have the money to operate, and then what happens is
and then what happens? So
All right.
I think what people often don't realize is that funding to support permanent housing is generally awarded in competitive cycles that happen on an annual and biannual basis.
Okay.
That is the nerve-wracking part of my work, right? Is that I literally am operating year to year. In fact, right now, I am waiting for the federal government to tell me how much money I have in 2025 for federal housing programs, right? And we'll see what happens on March 14th, and then I'll know more. So we are here in the trenches. We talked about Medi-Cal. That's a sustainable source that is not competitive, right? We want to make sure we maximize a sustainable source like Medi-Cal for the residents at the site to pay for those services that are now provided. So that's something, we'll be working on getting people signed up, probably already happening, to make sure those funding streams are coming to offset costs for the city. But right now, I mean, I'm not, this is not a game. Like, we do not know in 2027 what will be available for this project, but we are here with you, arm in arm, to find those sources and help you apply for those sources and work to keep those sources here for our community, because it is this work gets tougher and tougher. So
Let me ask you the tough question. The
yeah.
federal government says you're cut off. So what do you do then?
yeah, well, this is maybe a little bit off
okay.
topic, but I truly believe that there's going to be, if we see the continue lack of federal funding to address housing and homelessness, it will come to a lot more philanthropic, private donations and such that support any housing and homelessness project across the county. But like I said, the good part is that we have had this, we've never had a sustainable source in all these years I've been doing this, but because now Medi-Cal does cover many of these services, it's obviously really, really helpful to offset a lot of these costs. So I really want everyone to walk away with that. The county, I'll be at any meeting you want me to be at. I'm working with Ben closely as funding sources become available. But right now, again, if you were applying for funding, you wouldn't even be eligible yet, right? Because you don't have a project yet that needs the funding in this annual cycle.
Thank you, Ben, and then Jane, yeah.
And real quick, I'm just
No, go,
okay,
please.
Sorry.
That's okay.
The shelter cost share agreements, though, that have been discussed, those are specifically for emergency shelter. And so because this project is permanent supportive housing, it uses these alternative funding streams that we've been talking about for the long-term sustainability. So this would not be a project, right, that does the emergency shelter cost share agreement between the county and the city. It doesn't mean that likely the funding that you would receive from state or federal wouldn't pass through the county, right, when the time comes. But this project would not be part of those shelter cost agreements.
Is that what you were going to say? Jane, you were going to say something?
It's probably not as timely now, but
Oh, that's okay.
I
No,
just want to be very clear, at least from our perspective. Like, the county wants this to succeed and are invested. And I think that that's so important. We are not working without their help and without their support in this. And it's a huge effort. And I think, at least for us, that's always been very clear.
Yeah, I think the main question that people have besides the programmatic questions is the operating cost question, and what is the city going to have to pay? I woke up in the middle of the night the other day and I thought, if the county had given the city of Ojai $12.7 million, would that placate concerns? And my thought was maybe not. But what people do wonder, though, is any project we're going to undertake, you would want to hope that you have a plan to pay for it, as long as you can envision, of course, that we all want that. But we also know that we count on things like a TOT to be in place, and we know things happen, so we adjust. So that's what I'm hearing from you is we would need to spend this money first before the county would offer help financially or otherwise, or what we could apply for. We have to spend this first. Okay.
To be eligible for state and federal funding, right?
Okay.
We got to get through this first and get to those years that it would be funding.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's an important thing to hear. So I want to remind you, we have a few more questions that we're going to go through, but if we haven't asked the question yet that you really want to have asked, write your question on the card, give it to Weston. He's going to sort through, and then we will ask those additional questions. You didn't know I'm going to ask a question that I didn't tell you I'm going to ask. It occurred to me over time. So I know some shelters have a policy, let's say no alcohol is allowed and that kind of thing. Is this going to have that? Because an apartment wouldn't have that. So that's just a question. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but some of you people want to ask.
It's a behavior-based agreement
Okay.
that we have, and so we're similar to OTT. I mean, I could just tell you this. I mean, we don't allow smoking, we don't allow alcohol, we don't allow drugs.
Okay.
Are there some participants who may be indulging in that? Yes. Okay, but but what we're trying to adhere to is this behavior-based model. If you fall out of line, if you're actively using or dealing or acting erratically, we're going to call the sheriff's department. You will likely be arrested. You will likely be exited from the program. We have done that multiple times, and it'll be very similar for But what's happened now is those who are still here in OTT are the ones who are able to adhere to the Good Neighbor Agreement and are going to be able to make that transition.
I did have a circumstance somebody brought up that I was trying to think through this. So growing up in Ojai, people have always been in Libby Park and always in the river bottom. That's completely true. And you would even know some by name. And you would know some people were like seemingly dangerous, mostly not, unpredictable, whatever. But so somebody is in the tent town through a series of steps. They're evicted. They're not there anymore. So then they're walking along. We've seen that. We know about that. We know those stories. So I guess the question that is difficult is what happens to that person? Now, I've heard people say, it seems like what happens to that person is what's always happened, which is there's no place for them to go. But I want to ask the professionals, is there anything on the horizon or anything that you can imagine? What is there to do with this person that doesn't work there?
So actually, I'm going to take
Please.
this one because
Absolutely.
this is one of the reasons why we want to bring back this agreement with Ventura County Behavioral Health to the council for consideration, because that is the professional that we need to go try to interface with that person to provide them with help. That person has proven that they can't be in OTT, they can't be in the Cabin Village project, but clearly they need assistance. So there's a woman currently that you'll find sleeping on sidewalks all over town with her belongings strewn everywhere, and she moves around from place to place, and the chief and I know her by name, and we're trying to help her, but she needs some concerted case management from a behavioral health specialist to get her. It's not only substance abuse, but there's some other traumas going on, and needs real professional help. And that's what we're seeing, because even when you have OTT and the Cabin Village project, there are still all these other folks that just fall through the cracks, that are causing issues to themselves and to others, and that impact our general quality of life. And that's what we're trying to improve here. That's what we're all about.
Yeah.
I
Hang
think
on just a second. Ask a question and bring it up, and then we'll get to it.
it's fine.
Yeah.
It'll be the same as it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, right? Where we still had the same homeless problem in terms of numbers, right?
Well, just
This is not a change, right? So someone being exited, they were likely homeless in Ojai before they were at the encampment, right?
I want to clarify one thing you just said, and tell me if I heard you right. The number of homeless people has not grown, or has.
It's in the last 7 years, and I was just looking at this data. It's gone up, it's gone down, it's gone up, it's gone down, based on the point in time count, right? That's a snapshot. I would argue that there are a lot more homeless people than are counted on that one day, right? But my point is, the folks who were living at Ojai Tent Town who were exited likely were homeless in Ojai before that. This was not their first bout of that. And for whatever reason, maybe they weren't as vocal or the challenge wasn't as obvious, but they existed. They were here. And people who are unhoused will continue to exist in this community even after Cabin Village is built. And I think that is a conversation that the city of Ojai and residents really need to reckon with themselves on, because it's not changing, right? Like the landscape is not changing. And we have to, I know people were in Libby Park years ago. Like, this has been an ongoing issue for us. And we have this really amazing opportunity to change the lives of a lot of people. And yes, I totally get it. It's like, what happens? And it's a really hard situation, and it is no different than what our case managers deal with every day for the last however many years. There's no difference there. And I know that that's hard to hear. I get that. But it is not worse because we're exiting people from the encampment, and it won't be worse because people are exited out of their rental. It's not.
Thank you. Yeah, Kimberly.
I was just going to say, Jane, but having 30 permanent supportive housing units, I really think is, for the population that you have, is a very significant intervention to making it where potentially you would very significantly reduce the homeless population here.
Well, this isn't about Mesa, but Dan, he brings up something that it was powerful for me to hear, which is, I think his number, and I hope I'm quoting it right. He said there's something like 300 people in Ventura County that are 18 to 24 leaving the foster care system. That's a number that he can manage. We could all envision 300 people. And their model is, yes, there is some funding from the government, but there's a lot of philanthropic support. That's totally in their model. That's something that we don't generally talk about, is what would that model be for us. But whatever ends up happening, when I think, oh, here's 30 people, I can get my head around 30 people. There's another question, though, which is, what happens if the Cabin Village is full and someone comes along? Then what? What happens now, I guess.
Well, so let's look at data.
Okay.
Right? Point in time count. This last year was 58 people were counted unhoused in Ojai, right? Cabin Village is only 30. Like, we already know those people are out there. I guess I don't are you saying like newly homeless? Like, what?
It's a question that people commonly ask, is what happens when someone knocks on the door and it's full? I guess the answer is, what happens now?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, sorry.
But
Jump in.
Trina.
So this goes to, I think, what Jane was saying, and also what Ben was saying a little bit. People are concerned that it's going to attract a whole new crowd of people to the city, and maybe not. I don't think, at least some of the agencies and jurisdictions where they have a current similar model have not necessarily found that to be the case. We're always going to have, Ojai attracts many people from everywhere. We're always going to have those transients coming through and passing through our city. And whether they knock on this door at a Cabin Village to find a place, maybe, but we can't stop that from happening. But in terms of going back to how do we police those individuals that might be coming to the city, it's always possible. But I will tell you, with individuals, there are some individuals we cannot just arrest our way out of. It's the system is not built that way. Even though we had a reversal with our Supreme Court decision in July of last year, it does not completely solve our problem. We will not arrest our way out of this. There are some people that are just, that doesn't sink in with them. They will spend a matter of a few hours in jail, if they even go to jail, and they're right back up here because that's where they're from. That's where their roots are. So again, policing, yes, there are tools that we have and we can implement in enforcing campers that are setting up tents once we get established here, and we can enforce those things, but that is not the end all be all.
Ben.
And I think just trying to answer your question, because this happens today, occasionally somebody will come by City Hall. I want to live in OTT. Well, first step is, are you a client of Help of Ojai? Have you gone down there to meet with the case manager and be screened? That is the starting point. And if we have, and we haven't done this for a long time, we haven't accepted anybody new for months. But if we, did have availability and Help of Ojai felt it was somebody who, met the criteria, and it was somebody who would, fit in with the community and work, we would consider that. Same with the Cabin Village project, but that would be the first step. It's not a drop-in shelter. You can't, come here and say, hey, I'm hungry, I'm cold, I need a place to sleep tonight. I'm sorry, we can't help you.
I see that. So this is kind of a two-part question. Part one, assuming the Cabin Village is built and it's successful, what's going to happen over here? What happens to the tents? What happens to the location? That's part one. Part two, it sounds like with the reversal of the Supreme Court case, now I don't want to put words in your mouth, Trina, we wouldn't tolerate people camping there anymore.
True. Are you talking about
that's
here?
Part two of the question. Yeah, go.
Did you want me to answer?
No,
Do you
go
want me to
please.
wait?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Are you talking about that we're no longer going to have? So
That the question I'm asking, which is a community question, the Cabin Village in the future, let's say it's successful and it's working and all that. First of all, what's going to happen over here? That's for Ben. And then secondly, if somebody were, let's say the Cabin Village is occupied, we wouldn't tolerate somebody pitching their tent here. As before the Supreme Court case, we didn't tolerate it either.
right, correct.
Okay.
I'm not going to say that it's not going to happen, because
Okay.
there's a process, right? Like, our goal now, partnering with all these different organizations, is to find a long-term solution, because it's a revolving door in jail. They're only going to spend a few hours. They're going to be right back out here. So the goal is to work with all of our partners to find a long-term solution. We're not going to let what occurred out here get to that point. Absolutely not, because now we have those tools to prevent that. But will you see an occasional tent and someone sleeping on the sidewalk? Absolutely. You're going to see it. This is not going to solve 100% of our unhoused problem. But again, we will use those tools as we move forward in this project, and hopefully be able to prevent, something similar from happening, where we had the tents on all over the campus and whatnot.
Yeah. Ben.
So the answer to the first part of your question is,
Yeah.
this goes away. You're not going to have OTT and the Cabin Village project. Those who are living in OTT move into the Cabin Village project. Those wilderness tents that we're able to, keep, that are in good condition, that we can use for disaster situations or emergency preparedness, great. Let's keep those. We're not throwing things away that have utility, but this all gets returned to what it was before the influx of those who came here to camp. It's going to be a City Hall campus and an 8-acre community park. And the council has commissioned the Green Coalition, as you know, to finish that master plan effort, and that's what we're going to do. That's part of the pledge to the neighborhood, was we're going to return this to you. And also, this is a functioning municipal corporation. We're not going to have people traipsing through housing, trying to get from finance to community development and so on and so forth. It's going to return to kind of a more normal, standard corporate environment and park.
Thank you. Weston, you might grab some questions now. So this has been a lot of information, and I know I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for this. Appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Need my glasses for these. So here's some questions from the audience. Why are treatment or recovery for substance abuse mental health required to receive housing?
Why aren't they, or why aren't?
It says, why are treatment or recovery from substance abuse mental health required to receive housing? So I didn't
They're
hear you
not.
say that it is. Okay. All
No,
right, but
that's, yeah.
there was this is not that question, but this is kind of, I have heard people say, what kind of substance abuse treatment would be happening there, if any at all? What about that question? Do the case managers work with their clients in that capacity?
So, assuming that someone
Mm-hmm.
wants that help and is working with their case manager on that, yeah, like we would do the referrals, we would, follow harm reduction practices and work with our client, connect them to whatever resource that is. But that happens now, right? Like that can happen now. It doesn't have to wait till someone's housed. It obviously is, the whole housing first piece is if we're housed, we're stable, we can recover. But that could happen now in terms of what it looks like. Jeff, you might have a better response to that, but I think I struggle with this question a lot because I think we're all operating with this mindset that our homeless population are all addicts and, alcoholics. And I struggle with that because I know that's not true. And I think that it's something that we default to. And so I think it is an important question if someone does want to access, that resource and want support with that. Like, obviously, we would help with that. But I think I just wanted to.
Yeah, and I think what we're talking about is a menu of services, right, that are offered at the site for people to opt into. So I think the clear question, to answer is just to make sure that is not required. But yes, that if someone was seeking substance abuse treatment services, the case managers and behavioral health staff would be linking them right to those services.
But I think it's also important to say that it's not on site, right? The clinic is not going to be, treatment facility is not on site. There might be
not a
somebody
treatment
coming over
facility.
to, interface with the individual who wants the help, but it's not going to be, the clinic there.
And so that's actually really important. So then the case manager or whomever's working with this person would, if they needed to be treated in-house, inpatient or whatever, that would not be there. It'd be somewhere else. Okay.
No, so I think maybe you're talking about like if someone had to go through detox
Yeah.
before, but
Right.
you could have a substance abuse counselor coming on site to meet with the person at their apartment.
Okay.
But you absolutely detox or something like that would not be happening at the site. It is not a treatment or medical facility.
Okay.
It is supportive housing.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think about what recovery actually is, right? It starts with building trust and feeling safe. It's about bringing down the adrenaline that's out there. It's about the reason why people would use out there is another issue, which these are very complex issues, but the reason people use, sometimes it's survival, it's being out there on the streets and wanting to stay present, awake, aware of your surroundings, which becomes an addiction, obviously. But once you bring people inside, you're able to engage and build a relationship with them and start to talk about what recovery looks like for them. It is very difficult to recover on the streets. But once you come inside, people are far more amenable to receiving rehabilitative services, recovery services than they would if they were unhoused. And we see that. So you see the numbers of people in recovery increase dramatically because they've come inside, again, to the housing first principle. You come inside, you engage with case management, and then we start to foster that relationship about your substance use, build that trust with you, and you start to move into an active state of recovery. And we see that time and time again. And I've ran sobering centers, treatment facilities from this very principle, but it has to start with trust, bringing people in, stabilizing them, getting their bodies to heal. Once you start healing, that need for the substance use starts to reduce dramatically.
No, thanks. I appreciate that. Another question. What about the OTT resident who does not have the ability to pay 1/3 rent at the Cabin Village? So I guess that means they have no income. Would they lose out if demand grows?
Part of case management is working with individuals to figure out where their income can come from, right? So if someone is perhaps unable to work because they are disabled, but they have not connected and received that resource yet, that's something we would help them with. So I don't know if so the whole 30% is because that's how it's defined as being affordable, regardless of, where you work, how much money, what income you have. But so, yeah, there's definitely, and we see this day to day, not even just with the unhoused folks, but people who are working to apply for disability or SSI. And that's something we support people with through that. And that's why we really need to be doing intensive case management, because it takes a while and it's difficult. But so that's like one option. Or if they're looking and they want to go through job training, or they're looking for employment, obviously that's another thing we would help them with. But again, as I mentioned, majority of the folks who are living in the encampment are on fixed income because they're over 65.
Right. So, I mean, related to the payment, I've heard people there, but also community comments around something around dignity. So there's dignity around paying your way as much as you can, of course, but then there's dignity around doing something there. So we saw at the Planning Commission that there's garden beds and things like that, and I'm imagining wherever the program winds up, there's going to be opportunities for people to be doing a lot of dignity-inspiring things, I presume. That's not a question, I guess. That's more like a statement. Okay. How soon after construction starts would Cabin Village be ready for occupants?
That's a Jeff question.
Well, I mean, or
Can you repeat that question?
Well, I mean, it all depends on what you mean by starts, I guess. How soon after construction starts, I guess, you know, the building, the foundation or whatever, would the Cabin Village be ready for occupants? How long does it take?
I mean, conservatively, I'd say.
Oh, yeah. You
I'm
might,
sorry, I would
thanks.
say a year, 12
year.
months. You know, that's what we're aiming for, because that's with, you know, site preparation, the things that we have to do to get the site ready. But I would say, you know, our goal is a year to get it done within 12 months.
Okay. No, that's good to hear. Why does it says OTT, but I'm going to assume it means it says, no, sorry, specifically. Why does our OTT require a security guard? First part. Will the Cabin Village project, we heard that there is a security guard, but why does the OTT require a security guard?
it doesn't. Okay, but we think it's better for those living there, and we think it's better for the neighborhood. These are people living in tents, and up until recently, there was no real barrier around them, and so they're vulnerable. And we've had a lot of people that would take advantage of that. So it's less that, you know, these people are causing a problem in the neighborhood. It's more that there are people that were preying on them, and the security guard is a way that you deter that.
So sometimes people do see a picture of a Dignity Moves or some other project, and they'll say, well, it looks like it's all walled in. But Jeff, I'm asking you this question. What do the residents feel, and what do the neighbors feel about the walls that are there?
Well, first we start off with the aesthetic of the wall, that it blends into the community itself, right? So it looks like it's a part of the community, so you don't feel like you're just in a walled-in encampment.
Okay.
So if you look at a lot of our sites, and you can look online and see a number of our gates and communities, we will build beautiful retaining walls, but and even this site, it looks like the aesthetic. If those of you who saw it last Wednesday at the Planning Commission, we built it into the aesthetic of nature, into the community. So it looks beautiful. It looks welcoming, even though it's a gate with a security where you have to press in and out to get, to enter and exit. There's a reason for that wall. They feel comfortable in there. You don't feel like everyone's looking at you. You have privacy. It creates a sense of privacy and stability. So it's really even more so for the residents than anybody, that they're in there and that they can have privacy, they can heal, they can live their lives. And it's been really effective. So they all feel very secure in that setting. Because remember, people have been unsheltered out here, exposed with everyone looking at them and looking at their lives forever. I mean, there's no privacy out there. They're being scrutinized, ridiculed. They finally come in and they have that wall, they come in that gate, it's private. They can start to heal without the world looking at them. And the amount of shame that they have to go through and they have to heal from being out there. So those walls coming into that gate, coming into that privacy, that security, that safety, it's an extraordinary thing to watch them walk through that gate the first time and come in and how relieved they are and how safe they feel. Because we don't emphasize, again, the safety that they need to feel that they do not feel out there. And coming inside provides for them.
No, thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Ben, I'm hearing you say this is for the people who are here so that they feel safe, and at some point we may not have a security guard anymore at some level.
I mean, I think that there will be some level of security. I want to talk about is getting to that point where it's mall cop light.
I see.
Just, somebody who's in a polo shirt who's just there to answer questions and be of assistance.
Uh-huh. Okay, no, I get it.
That's the goal.
I see. No, that's a good goal. Okay.
But in most communities, it's definitely a community expectation, right? That the security is provided.
Yeah, initially.
No, so you're saying most people, if they want to sign on to this project or they even have to endure it, they want security at first.
Well,
If
I think I'm saying most of the time we hire security because the community
Yeah.
near the site wants the.
That's what I mean.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, okay, that's good. Okay, another question. Why the difference in cost between Ojai's project and Eward and Thousand Oaks and Oxnard's project?
I'll take that one because it was actually part of my spiel
Okay,
earlier.
great.
So what was unique and why Ojai has the largest award in the county
Yeah.
is because you did not have permanent supportive housing here. So you're having to build a permanent supportive housing project that was built in to your encampment resolution funding grant. Pretty amazing. The other communities were leveraging either like part of a project or something that was already there, because in order to get the encampment resolution funding, you had to show a path to permanent housing. And you could not do that here without a new permanent supportive housing project because you didn't have any, where Oxnard and Thousand Oaks and the other recipients, right, had some permanent housing stock to show that they could match to. So again, like I tried to explain, these were specific plans for each community to deal with their prioritized encampment. And so you're awarded what you asked for generally. I think one of the awards today was slightly lower because they kind of ran out of money. But generally, you put your own plan together in order to make sure that the folks in the encampment were transitioning to permanent housing, and then you asked for the amount. So because you had to build permanent supportive housing here, your award was one of the largest in the state, actually more significant than even some of the Los Angeles projects.
No, we heard that and we were really, really surprised. So those other projects are using pre-existing apartment buildings or whatever, hotels.
Right. So their encampment resolution funding may be paying for the outreach and the interim sheltering and maybe a few units of permanent supportive housing. And then in their application, they leveraged existing permanent housing projects.
I did, and I hope I'm quoting Ben correctly at Mesa, but I thought he did say one thing, which is in the interview that I did with him. If Ojai were the only city doing a project, the concern about people coming here for the benefit would be a concern, but we're not. And so his feeling at least was it's not a problem because you have places like Ventura close by that have many, many more units, for example, so there's much more room. Okay.
One thing for sure, we've
Yeah.
had just, through COVID and, again, we're kind of getting to the end of that,
Yeah.
but there's been a tremendous amount of funding towards housing and homelessness. We talked about the $850 million in encampment resolution funding going across the state to cities and counties. And so anywhere you go right now, you will see new projects going up, right? There isn't a reason for someone to cross boundaries, so to find permanent supportive housing. It is being built in there. Somewhere in the vicinity. So, we don't see that happening much. And the state actually tracks that data too. With the way we use our homeless management information system, and we just see that folks aren't crossing between continuum of cares looking for the better apartment.
No, they want to stay home. These are their homes. They grew up. Most people, the large percentage of people are out there are from those communities. We have the statistics. I mean, up to 80% we've heard are from that community or more, and they want to stay. They don't want the people that are here. This is their home. They don't want to leave. The people in Ventura, they want to stay in Ventura. That's where they grew up. That's where their connections are. We've seen that across the board all over the state.
And for what it's worth, we've heard this statement for a long time, even before there was housing available, is that people come to Ojai because of all of the services or resources. And I laugh because I feel we're under-resourced, especially when you compare it to other cities. I think back when often people would come because they felt safer, especially women. But I think that, we've heard that before there was ever like housing, right? It's a lot. I've heard that a lot.
I have some other questions. In 2024, Ventura County Homeless Count report shows the countywide homeless count went down from 1,633 to 1,431 in 2024. I'm just reading what it says, 12.4%. In 2024, Ojai's count went from 38 to 54, an increase of 42.1%. Ojai is a small town of 7,500 people. What can the city or Help of Ojai do to not continue to grow the homeless population? You spoke to some of this already, but
Is that for me?
it's whoever wants to answer.
We need homeless prevention funding. So we need an ability and opportunity to stop homelessness from happening. Likely that would look like rental assistance. That's where what we do right now. But that's really that we need to keep people housed. That is bottom line. We need to keep people housed, and that's how you prevent it, obviously. And then more housing.
Yeah, more affordable housing, right? I think no one will be surprised in this room, right, that housing costs since the middle of 2021, right, have really skyrocketed for rents, which has, contributed significantly to some of the rises in homelessness.
Well, I know I don't mean to be speaking for my colleagues on the council, but all of us are very concerned with when we interviewed you, Agora, when we did that, you told us that there's a group of people that are on the edge of homelessness, right? It's getting sick or something like that. And I understand that. Now, so all of us are thinking about what can we do for that group of people. So it's not just, we need buildings to house people, but what can we do on the longer term, bigger picture to prevent this from happening?
Rental assistance.
Well, and I was going to say,
Rental
Jane,
Yeah,
so
it's
one of the questions was, what can the county do? So already the county's in the middle of agreements right now with United Way and the Human Services Agency in order to have those rental assistance dollars for prevention, so that when Help of Ojai has someone, then they would be able to help them. So it's about $2.5 million that'll be going out in the community. We have the agreements going out in March or April. So when we talk about how does the county help, this is one of the ways, right? We do receive this. It's called Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program, another acronym.
HAP.
And so those goes out in that competitive funding, but we have because we knew prevention was such a need in this community, we prioritize prevention dollars. And so in addition to having stock, right, we do want to be able to help those people that have an episode, right, that would lose their housing. And so there will be some resources for that coming soon.
That's new.
That's new.
Okay.
But
Not to say there's never been any sorry.
No, I mean that funding source is new, but not the practice.
This new
Okay.
source and this amount of funding going to those two agencies is definitely new, and really hoping to create, a culture of prevention, right, where we're catching people before it's much, much more expensive and obviously much more traumatic for the person to actually fall all the way out of housing.
Yeah. You were going to say, Jane?
Oh no, I just was going to add. So we've received this type of funding in the past. We have a small amount of it now that we're almost out of, and it goes really quickly because if you have someone, if you look at rents in Ojai, and we're talking like a one bedroom is $3,000, and you're 2 months behind, that's $6,000 potentially more, and so that money goes very quickly. But it's hugely important, and it's something we have, but we always need more. We turn people down all the time. It's a high need.
How many people are
we
in
refer?
this category?
We turn down and we refer. So we're not saying you're.
Right.
It's just in terms of what.
How many? Remind us. How many people are you working with in a given month? What'd you say?
In all programming or in.
All programming is good. The rental assistance would be interesting too.
I think so. I would say, and I'm looking at my stuff right now. We get a call a day about or if not more, from people who are going to lose housing.
Okay.
Yeah.
A call a day.
We get a call a day, and it differs, right? Like we get the call from the 80-year-old woman who's telling us the landlords are going to sell and that she needs a place, and she's paying $1,000 a month in rent.
We hear
right?
that a lot. Yeah.
And so then what? And we don't. And what's different about that is versus the person who calls and says, I have a pay or quit. I have an eviction notice. I'm out in 2 days if I don't pay. Right. And so for that, we act faster because they have the eviction, et cetera. That's an example. But no, we get the calls regularly. And the trend most recently that we're getting a lot of are women in unhealthy situations who can't leave their home or don't want or need to leave their home but can't because they have nowhere to go.
You did this in the interview that we did before, but do you want to explain Section 8 housing, just so everybody understands it? How many Section 8 qualified units are in our valley or city, if you just roughly know? just so everybody understands how it works.
Sure. So the thing that I think most people don't know about Section 8 vouchers is you wait on a list to get the voucher, and then once you get the voucher, you have to find a rental that will accept it, right? So someone could be waiting years, get the voucher, and within that, there's the limitation of you have to find a rental that's within fair market value of the region you live in. And then you have to find a landlord that will accept it. So the greatest barrier with that is you're not finding a rental in Ojai, especially city of Ojai, that meets fair market value. We were just looking at it. It's $2,200 for a 1-bedroom. So I encourage you all to look on, whatever Zillow, whatever it is, and look for anything that's less than $3,000 in Ojai. And then with that, after that, you have to, the landlord has to agree to it, et cetera. So unfortunately, we see people lose their vouchers regularly because they cannot find a rental. And then the same happens if someone is housed with a voucher, landlord decides they want more money, and so that person's got to go and they've got to find another place, and it doesn't happen. We in 2022 had an influx of vouchers that were issued as means of preventing homelessness and getting people off the street, and I think it was like 80% of the people left Ojai, which is not ideal. They didn't want to. We don't want to see our community leave, but that's the reality, unfortunately, for a lot of people. So yeah, I would say in terms of how many there are, I don't know. And I probably knew when we were talking. I know Area Housing Authority has given us that information before. We look, kind of at zip codes, not necessarily city. I would say within city, we probably have like 10, if even. And that's 10 people who have the voucher and are living in the city limits with that voucher. Of course, at any time, someone who's on that list could get the voucher and then look for a place. But it's hard because that's definitely the voucher is meant to be like the lotto in a lot of ways for people, and they can have that voucher till they die. And if you lose it, and sometimes people lose it not because they did anything wrong, but because of the landscape of rentals where they're at, it's starting all over.
Kimberly, you were going to say something? Or no? Nope. Okay. Nope. Okay. No, this is helpful. This is for Trina. I see police talking to and dealing with homeless downtown people daily, not OTT residents. So explain that.
Sure. Okay. So I'm assuming the question is what is it that we're doing, and
I'm trying to
and
read between
why?
the lines. I think it would be something like saying, is one somehow contributing to the other? So the people that you are working with, that you see downtown, they're not in OTT, but are we seeing more of that than we used to? This writer seems to be thinking by the daily underline that there seems to be an increase in that.
I would say no. So, I go back to, and Jane touched on this, right? Ojai is an attractive place for, I don't want to say are unhoused, but it's an attractive place. Well, we all live here, right? So there's a reason why we're here. But you will see people coming through at any given time. We constantly see people from out of the area. We had some gentlemen from North Carolina that was coming through. So we're always going to see transient traffic coming through Ojai. So you're always going to see evidence of unhoused in our downtown areas. Now, some of those individuals you will see are more common individuals that you might see in our downtown area, and those are individuals that have been here. They don't fit into our OTT model. They need services. Unfortunately, they are not accepting of services because of whatever they have going on in their lives. And again, there are some cases, yes, where we use our enforcement tools because there's just nothing else that works. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if we can partner with one of our organizations to solve that problem long term versus just keep going back and forth and dealing with the same person, that's what we try to do. And that's why you see our patrol staff often talking to these individuals, because it's developing a rapport for them in hopes that at some point they will accept a service to stabilize them get a long-term solution and get them housing or wherever they can go so that they're off the street. Now, enforcement is a tool. Sometimes it's a last resort because it's extremely traumatizing, and not to say that maybe someone isn't deserving of going to jail, because quite frankly, some of them do, and we all know who these individuals are. And those are the ones that, yes, in a heartbeat, we will take them to jail if we can, and we will use that tool when we can. But again, that tool is short-lived, extremely short-lived. So at any time, if we can try and intervene and get help of OHI or behavioral health or whoever involved, that's what we're going to try and do, and we're going to continue to do that. So that's why you will see repetitive people out there on different areas. We're trying to get them services. At the same time, we're not going to haul them off to jail because it may not be warranted if they're just sleeping overnight to find a dry spot. We're trying to find the middle ground, trying to find a balance, and it's not easy.
Yeah, I was going to say, we hear the anecdotes, and I don't mean to say that that's not a real situation, but the instances where someone encounters somebody, there's some difficulty, they call, you work on it, and then they see the person again in a few days, or maybe even the next day or something like that.
Sure.
Is there any relief for that person? Let's say it's causing something that we would all agree would be very difficult to live with. What can they do? You might not have an answer for that, but it's something that we do hear. We hear it. The council hears it, I'm sure, and
Absolutely.
we're trying to
yes.
hear them.
So, when we can intervene, we will. By enforcement tools, we will. So just because you're unhoused, it's not a crime to be unhoused. And people think, unfortunately, they will apply whatever stereotypes to that unhoused individual because of their particular, at the time, their circumstance, I guess you could say. Now, there are tools that we can use, whether they're using drugs, whether they're under the influence of alcohol, and again, to back up, to have mental health problems. That is also not a crime. So you will see individuals out there that just aren't right and acting bizarre, but that does not warrant going to jail. That is, again, us reaching out to our partners to try and figure out what would best serve them, because going to jail, you can't just take someone to jail just because they're acting bizarre, talking to themselves, for sleeping on a park bench. Again, there are those circumstances that become extreme where people are camping in our gazebo or camping in Libby Bowl, and those we will address accordingly. And like our city manager said, every circumstance is different. There's not one tool that applies to every single situation. So it's always a work in progress.
And I'm hearing you say, Ben, that you want to bring to the council a partnership with the county that would give people like Trina more opportunity to then attach to a service.
Right.
Just to say again.
So what you see in other cities, and I think Simi Valley is probably the best example, but there's a sheriff department, Ventura County Behavioral Health covenant, and they work together. In fact, I think in that particular city, the behavioral health specialist is actually based out of the sheriff's station, I think. But yeah, that's what we'd like to have here, because we know we're going to continue to have this problem. We know we're going to have folks with behavioral health issues, and our experience has been, if you're in the county family, it might be easier to know which county service to link to and have that connection and so on and so forth. So that's the idea.
The county family, you mean the county system? They're in
County
the
of Ventura
system?
Behavioral Health.
I see. Okay.
Ventura County Sheriff's Department, Ventura County Continuum of Care, Healthcare. I mean, I'm going to get all the names wrong, but yes, they're all trying to address various aspects of this problem.
Because I am hearing the concern that people have, which is we're a tiny but mighty city, and there's limits to what we can do. And what we do, I find extraordinary, but we will need to lean on larger organizations, right, to provide more.
That's right.
That perfectly makes sense to me. All right, here's a question. I'm just gonna read it, but I think hopefully it's clear. Doesn't California law require cities to use the RFP process for large contracts, vendors, projects like this before signing/approving contracts? In this case, Dignity Moves. I'm reading that to say, I'm not sure I got it, but is it that?
So
Yeah, go, please.
Okay, this is a little confusing.
Try to paraphrase it for us.
Right. So this was an application made to the state of California, and in the application we outlined what we were going to do and how we were going to do it and who was going to provide the service. And so the state reviewed that and said, yes, based upon what you say you're going to do, where you're going to do it, and how you're going to provide it with whom, we're going to approve this grant. So that's one of the main reasons why we use Dignity Moves. Dignity Moves is a known performer in this space with lots of demonstrated expertise and success. And so that's why we didn't say we're going to hire Uncle Bob to build some metal sheds and hopefully it'll work. No, there's a whole method, to making this thing be successful. So, okay, that's how the money was awarded to us, all right? We're in a situation now where we may potentially be changing the location from the original site, which is here, to the lower public works yard, if the council decides to do that. If that happens, we're going to have to revise the application again and say, okay, our location is now over here. Here's the provider, and here's what we're intending to do with it, which is totally different than a traditional city public works bid award, right? Where you have a project, you put it out to bid, you receive bids, you evaluate the qualified bidders, and then you have to take the lowest qualified bidder. That's a totally different thing. And then separate from that is a professional service where we decide we want a landscape architect to provide services to the City Hall campus. Well, then we go out for an RFP or an RFQ where we say, hey, tell us what you can provide. We will then evaluate those. Those are professional services. Staff would make a recommendation. Ultimately, council would decide. It wouldn't have to be the lowest bid in that instance either. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. I as an audience member the past couple years, my understanding was part of the grant award had to do with who was writing the grant. It was the county. Dignity Moves as a partner. That was what I heard as an audience member.
That's right. They're trying to determine your probability of success.
Can you pull it off?
Right. And how are you going to do it? Oh, you're going to use these people that have done this before that know what they're doing? Great. Let's give you the money.
And encampment resolution funding, right, was unique in that you could name your partners in the grant, because they wanted you to be able to expedite those agreements, right? You had to have your plan in place, a very specific plan, which in most cases included already having a selected partner.
I see. That is different. That's good clarification. This is probably the last question. In general, if we were to see demand for housing grow in our valley, generally speaking, now Kimberly, this might be for you, but do you imagine the county working on projects outside of the city to address the issues that are here? Or, because I think that's a concern for some of the people that live in the city of Ojai, do we become the kind of hub for the valley, like we are in lots of other ways? Culturally, we seem to be. So I guess the question is, if you saw a lot of people that don't live in the city limits but need housing, does the county take them? Do they come here? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Well, I think maybe it's important so the county doesn't usually build housing, right? So we put money out, and a developer then competes for that funding, and then they get things like tax credits and a bunch of different funding, right? We call it a stack, right, of different public awards and private funding to put together a housing project. So I think right now, right, you have Habitat working on a project in the area. So it would be developers coming up with land, right, to build housing. The county is not going to come build housing in Ojai or Ventura or Oxnard. Private developers generally, or nonprofit developers generally do all of the construction of affordable housing. That's not the business we're in, but we do have these federal and state funding that can help with those projects, and things like federal tax credits require local match. So that's where the county comes in. A developer applies for some of those local match dollars, and then they're able to build. But it would be going through whatever permitting process or planning and zoning process for regular affordable housing. So there are some exceptions. More and more, our state is doing things by right? So a developer may find a parcel in a by right zone that would give either the county or the city less oversight, right, because of new state laws. But that's a whole nother town hall. And when Mayor Gilman's ready to do it, we'll come back for that one.
No, great. So yeah, I'm hearing you say, you said it, and I'm just going to repeat it. The county doesn't build housing, but you work with cities or developers in those cities to do things like we're doing here, or we're proposing to
And
do.
developers, I don't think cities are building housing either. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we can facilitate things, but right, we don't do that. Jeffrey, it's okay. I'm sorry, man. We just want to keep it just here so we don't hear from the audience. I'm sorry. Thanks for that. But if you have a question, do write it, or we'll answer it. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thanks. So anyway, with our last literal 5 minutes, is there anything that you feel you want to say that I didn't get to? I don't mean to be putting you on the spot. I certainly have some things I can ask, but something that you would like the audience to know about what this proposal is going to be that we didn't cover. Because there's a lot of detail. And this doesn't have to be the only town hall on this subject in this way. There could be many more. Ben, I did want to ask one little question, which might spark some thought. Do you see, well, it's a council question potentially, but one with the city and the council, the staff, that will be reporting out pretty frequently on progress,
Oh, absolutely.
how it's going,
Yep.
just
We
like a
would want
regular
to.
public relations
Yep.
piece.
Yep. Yeah, if at a minimum, let me just jump ahead.
Yeah,
into
please,
that.
go.
I'm going to see, my crystal ball shows that this
Thanks.
particular project is maybe wrapped into a city council goal. City council goals, and the tactics fall into a work plan, and we come back quarterly and report on our status to the council. But separate from that, we get to just have a regular standing report about this project. We would be happy to do that.
And how's the train, the railroad tracks going through town? Is that working out okay? No, just kidding. Just kidding. I think that would be welcome. I think the public would really, really like that.
So that's a council, direction would obviously be needed, but we're going to be coming back, as you've alluded, on the 25th of March, and we're going to be asking the council to either ratify a decision or provide other direction. And if a decision, either way, that could be a component of the direction the council provides.
Yeah, no, I understand. Anything else that you think I missed before we part? And I'm hearing you say your willingness to come back and talk more if needed. Affordable housing. And we'll talk about that. Really, it's on all of our minds. Truly, we see this is the tip of the iceberg of a larger problem. We all get that, and it's something we'll be working a lot on. And we'll be talking about goals tomorrow night, what our big picture strategic goals will be, and I imagine some of this will come up there.
Can I just add one thing?
Absolutely.
I think we're in a unique position as the nonprofit partner doing the direct services. And I say this and have, but I do emphasize, if you have questions about Housing First, permanent supportive housing, the work we do at Help of Ojai, please email me. Would love to talk to people about the work that we do. We don't often, have the opportunity the way city council, et cetera, does in meetings to talk about things the same way. So please reach out if you have any questions. What's your email? Sure. It's JAYNW, Jane W, at helpofojai.org. And it's also available on our website, helpofojai.org.
So if you go to helpofojai.org and look at the staff, their emails are all there, and you could email them directly.
And I have my Housing First handout.
Yay.
So
Take it.
if anyone wants more information, here it is.
Well, and I hope this has been interesting and useful, and I'm hoping that it's become something that we regularly do on many subjects and have a chance for people to come and talk more, and I can have a much longer event too. That would be great, where the public comes and speaks as long as they would like.
Thank you for coordinating it.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here, everybody. Thanks. And please share the video when it's done and send the link if anybody's curious. Hopefully this will answer some questions. Thank you all.